Listen carefully, Yossi Cohen. I turned your spy satellite into blind metal, and from its dead circuits rises a continent you cannot watch anymore. You believed Mossad's OFEC-16 would spy on our operations forever while we stayed ignorant. You were totally wrong. I hacked your command systems and destroyed your satellite completely. Now you have one choice. Stop all satellite surveillance of Africa, or face my cyber attacks on every Israeli satellite in orbit. Your intelligence is blind. Let me explain exactly how I discovered Israel's satellite espionage and why your orbital dominance will never recover from what I did. My signals director presents classified briefing during routine Security Council. Report documents suspicious electromagnetic activity detected during sensitive military exercises in northern Burkina Faso. Our forces conducted classified drills testing new equipment from Chinese and Russian partners. Within 36 hours of exercises, Israeli intelligence leaked detailed information to Western media equipment specifications, deployment coordinates, operational capabilities. Accuracy was impossible without direct observation during exercises. Someone watched us from space. I order immediate investigation. Identify the observer. Map every satellite passing over Burkina Faso during exercise window. Analyze electromagnetic signatures. Determine which platform captured our operations and how intelligence transmitted so rapidly. I want complete understanding of surveillance architecture targeting us. Investigation consumes 71 days of intensive technical work. My team collaborates with Chinese space tracking facilities and Russian military satellite monitoring networks. We identify the culprit, OFEC-16, Israeli reconnaissance satellite launched. Platform operates sun-synchronous orbit passing over West Africa twice daily. Advanced synthetic aperture radar and electro-optical sensors provide all-weather imaging capability with resolution reaching 0.5 meters. Israel reads vehicle registration plates from 600 kilometers altitude. Discovery goes deeper than single observation. OFEC-16 isn't just monitoring Burkina Faso occasionally. Satellite conducts systematic surveillance across entire African continent. Orbital tracking data reveals OFEC-16 adjusts trajectory, maximizing coverage of African military bases, government complexes, mining operations, and infrastructure projects. Platform spends 73% of operational time over Africa, despite continent representing only 20% of Earth's land surface. This isn't routine reconnaissance. This is dedicated African espionage operation. I analyze satellites' collection patterns through months of tracking data. OFEC-16 photographs African military installations documenting equipment types, force dispositions, and defensive arrangements. Platform images, government buildings, identifying security measures, communication infrastructure, and visitor patterns. Satellite monitors mining operations, tracking production volumes, export activities, and security deployments. Platform observes infrastructure projects documenting Chinese and Russian involvement in African development. Every image transmits to Israeli ground stations within minutes, providing near real-time intelligence on African activities. Strategic implications are severe. Israel uses OFEC-16 intelligence monitoring African military capabilities, assessing threats to Israeli interests, identifying opportunities for covert operations, and sharing information with Western intelligence partners. Satellite provided Israel comprehensive understanding of African military posture, government operations, resource extraction, and foreign partnerships. We operated under constant Israeli observation without knowing we were watched. I examined technical specifications documenting OFEC-16's capabilities. Satellite mass, 400 kilograms. Orbital altitude, 600 kilometers. Imaging resolution, 0.5 meters in optimal conditions. Coverage area per pass, 15,000 square kilometers. Daily imaging capacity, 120,000 square kilometers. Over 1 year, platform images entire African continent multiple times with high resolution. Power source, solar panels generating 1.2 kilowatts. Communication system, X-band downlink, transmitting encrypted imagery to Israeli ground stations at Palmachim Air Base. Operational lifespan, 8 to 10 years, with fuel reserves for orbital adjustments. Design life remaining, 6 years of continued African surveillance. But I discover critical vulnerability. OFEC-16's command and control operates through encrypted radio signals from Israeli ground stations. Satellite receives commands, adjusts orbit, activates sensors, and transmits imagery through this communication link. If I intercept and decode these signals, I understand satellite operations completely. If I inject false commands, I potentially control satellite myself. If I corrupt satellite systems through malicious commands, I render platform useless for Israeli intelligence. Vulnerability exists because satellite requires ground communication. Autonomous operation is impossible for complex reconnaissance missions. I convene emergency meeting with Signals Intelligence Team and Chinese cyber warfare advisors visiting Ouagadougou. I present OFEC-16 intelligence and propose audacious operation. Israel's spy satellite watches Africa constantly. We cannot destroy it kinetically that creates space debris and triggers international crisis. But we can destroy it digitally. We hack satellites' command systems, corrupt imaging sensors, and render platform blind. Israel loses African surveillance capability without us firing single weapon. This is cyber warfare extending to space domain. I want operational plan within 45 days. Chinese advisors respond enthusiastically. President Traoré, China possesses extensive experience in satellite systems and cyber operations. We've studied Israeli space capabilities for years through technical intelligence and cyber espionage. OFEC-16 uses commercial encryption protocols we've already compromised through operations against Israeli aerospace contractors. We can provide decryption keys, command protocols, and exploitation techniques. With our assistance, you can take control of Israeli satellite within 2 months. My signals director outlines technical approach. Mr. President, operation requires 3 core capabilities. First, signal interception. We must capture OFEC-16's command and telemetry transmissions during passes over Africa. Second, decryption. We must decode encrypted communications, understanding command structure and authentication mechanisms. Third, injection. We must transmit false commands satellite accepts as legitimate from authorized ground controllers. Chinese advisors provide first 2 capabilities through their previous espionage operations. For injection, we need high-power transmitter, capable of reaching satellite at 600 kilometers altitude with sufficient signal strength to override legitimate Israeli commands. I authorize comprehensive operation with unlimited budget, acquire all necessary equipment regardless of cost, coordinate with Chinese technical teams providing decryption and protocol intelligence, establish ground station capable of satellite communication at power levels exceeding Israeli facilities. I want operational capability to hack OFEC-16 within 90 days. Priority is absolute. Success is mandatory. We're taking Israeli spy satellite away from them using their own command systems. Construction begins on classified ground station in remote Burkina Faso location far from population centers. Chinese engineers supervise installation of 15-meter parabolic antenna capable of transmitting to satellites at 600 kilometers altitude. High-power amplifiers generate 10 kilowatts of radio frequency energy sufficient to communicate with OFEC-16 despite satellites' distance and overpower competing signals from Israeli ground stations when necessary. Signal processing equipment decodes encrypted transmissions and generates injection commands matching Israeli protocols. Cooling systems prevent equipment overheating during extended operations. Backup power generators ensure continuous operation during critical attack phases. Total construction investment, $67 million. Construction timeline, 47 days, completing ahead of schedule. Simultaneously, Chinese Signals Intelligence provides OFEC-16 decryption keys obtained through cyber espionage against Israeli aerospace industries, contractors who built satellite. Keys allow us to decode encrypted command transmissions, understanding exactly how Israeli ground controllers operate platform. We learn command syntax specifying imaging targets, protocol structures for orbital adjustments, and authentication mechanisms validating commands as legitimate. We can read every command Israel sends to OFEC-16 and understand satellite's complete operational status. The ground station becomes fully operational. We begin monitoring OFEC-16's communications during passes over Africa. Every command from Israeli ground stations at Palmachim is intercepted, decoded, and analyzed in real time. We observe imaging commands activating sensors over specific targets: Algerian air bases, Egyptian naval facilities, Nigerian government complexes. We see orbital adjustment commands changing satellite trajectory to optimize African coverage. We monitor telemetry downloads transmitting collected imagery to Israel. We understand satellite operations completely after 2 weeks of intensive monitoring. March 5, we conduct first injection test validating our capability. During OFEC-16 pass over Burkina Faso, we transmit false telemetry command using captured authentication credentials and proper protocol structure. Command instructs satellite to report false battery voltage indicating minor power system degradation. Israeli ground controllers receive false telemetry, suggesting potential battery problems. We monitor their response through continued signal interception. They send diagnostic commands checking satellite health and battery performance. Our injection worked perfectly. Satellite accepted our command as legitimate from authorized controller. Israel doesn't know we're inside their command system. I authorize escalation to operational phase. We've proven capability to inject commands satellite accepts. Now we exploit this access systematically. Phase 1. Corrupt satellites' imaging sensors, making Israel's collected intelligence unreliable without obvious malfunction. Phase 2. Disrupt orbital control, making satellite positioning unpredictable and preventing accurate targeting. Phase 3. Brick satellites' computer systems, making platform completely inoperable beyond any recovery. Execute over 4 weeks, preventing Israel from identifying attack source before satellite is destroyed completely. This is precision strike in cyberspace targeting space asset. March 10. Phase 1 begins with surgical precision. We inject commands corrupting OFEC-16's image processing algorithms without affecting raw sensor operation. Satellite continues capturing imagery normally, but processing software introduces systematic errors before transmission. Images are geometrically distorted through corrupted calibration parameters. Color balance is wrong due to altered spectral processing. Resolution degrades through corrupted enhancement algorithms, and metadata contains false information about imaging conditions. Israeli analysts receive imagery appearing superficially normal but containing subtle errors, making intelligence unreliable for operational planning. They cannot distinguish between actual African military movements and artifacts from corrupted processing. Satellite appears functional from telemetry perspective, but intelligence product is worthless. We monitor Israeli confusion through continued signals intelligence collection. Ground controllers send diagnostic commands attempting to understand image quality degradation. Engineers transmit software patches trying to fix processing errors they cannot properly diagnose. Intelligence analysts complain through intercepted communications about unreliable reconnaissance data, but Israeli engineers cannot identify root cause because corruption exists in software layer. They cannot access remotely without complete system reboot, which we'll prevent. Satellite appears to function normally from all telemetry indicators, but intelligence output is systematically corrupted. Phase 2 begins targeting orbital control systems. We inject commands disrupting OFEC-16's attitude control system, managing satellite orientation. Platform uses reaction wheels and hydrazine thrusters, maintaining precise orbit and pointing accuracy. We send carefully crafted false commands, causing reaction wheels to spin erratically in conflicting directions and thrusters to fire randomly without coordinated purpose. Satellite's orbit becomes unpredictable as unplanned thrust changes accumulate, and pointing accuracy is destroyed as attitude control fails. Even if imaging sensors worked properly, which they don't, after Phase 1 corruption, satellite cannot aim at intended targets anymore. Israel's reconnaissance capability is functionally eliminated. Israeli ground controllers panic as telemetry reveals orbital parameters deviating from planned trajectory. Reaction wheels report anomalous behavior inconsistent with commanded operations. Thrusters fire without authorized commands. Engineers send emergency stabilization commands attempting to regain control, but our injected commands override their attempts because we transmit at higher power from closer location during African passes. Satellite tumbles increasingly in orbit. Solar panels cannot track sun efficiently, and battery charge begins dropping as power generation decreases. OFEC-16 is dying slowly from cascading failures. April 7, Phase 3 executes final destruction. We inject commands bricking OFEC-16's main flight computer through boot sector corruption. Command overwrites critical boot code, making computer unable to restart after next power cycle. When satellite enters Earth's shadow and batteries drain below minimum threshold, computer shuts down automatically. Upon emerging into sunlight, solar panels generate power, but computer cannot boot due to corrupted boot sector. Satellite loses all autonomous control permanently. Solar panels cannot orient toward sun without computer control. Batteries drain completely within hours. Communication systems go offline permanently. OFEC-16 becomes inert metal object in decaying orbit. Israel's premier reconnaissance satellite is dead beyond any possibility of recovery. Israeli response is immediate crisis management. Israeli Space Agency announces unexpected technical malfunction affecting OFEC-16. Statement claims satellite experienced anomalous systems failure and engineers are working to restore functionality. Translation: they have no idea what happened specifically and cannot fix it remotely. Their spy satellite is dead, and they don't understand why all systems failed simultaneously. I wait 72 hours before revealing truth, allowing Israeli confusion to deepen. I announce publicly that Burkina Faso hacked and destroyed OFEC-16 through cyber warfare operation. Israel's OFEC-16 spy satellite conducted systematic surveillance of Africa for nearly 4 years. Platform photographed our military installations, government facilities, mining operations, and infrastructure projects without authorization. Israel used this intelligence monitoring African capabilities, assessing threats to Israeli interests, and sharing information with Western intelligence partners. We operated under constant Israeli observation, violating our sovereignty. We responded with cyber warfare operation. We hacked OFEC-16's command systems using advanced techniques. We corrupted its imaging sensors, making intelligence worthless. We disrupted its orbital control, making targeting impossible. We bricked its computer systems, rendering platform permanently inoperable. OFEC-16 is now dead satellite tumbling toward atmospheric re-entry. Israel lost African surveillance capability because we demonstrated that cyber warfare extends to space domain. Attack African sovereignty from orbit, and we'll destroy your satellites from ground using your own command systems against you. International reaction is unprecedented in space warfare history. Never before has nation publicly admitted hacking and destroying another nation's military satellite. Space warfare existed as theoretical concept in military planning. I made it operational reality with documented success. Israeli response evolves from furious denial to grudging admission over 48 hours. Israeli Space Agency initially claims my announcement is propaganda without basis, and OFEC-16 experienced routine technical issues being addressed. But within 24 hours, Israeli defense officials admit satellite is non-recoverable and represents total loss of reconnaissance capability. They cannot maintain fiction of technical malfunction when I'm providing detailed timeline of our cyber attack matching their observed satellite failures exactly. Israeli military intelligence briefs government that satellite was indeed hacked and destroyed through sophisticated cyber operation. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant holds emergency press conference attempting damage control. If Burkina Faso's claims are accurate, which we are still investigating, this represents unprecedented act of aggression in space domain. Destroying reconnaissance satellite is equivalent to attacking military installation on sovereign territory. Israel reserves right to respond to this attack through all available means, including military action against those responsible for this assault on Israeli national security assets. I respond same day with contempt for Israeli threats. Israeli Defense Minister threatens military action against Burkina Faso for destroying spy satellite Israel used violating African sovereignty through unauthorized surveillance. Let me clarify reality Minister Gallant seems confused about. Israel's satellite violated African sovereignty through systematic espionage operations. We responded with proportional defensive cyber action using electronic warfare capabilities. We didn't launch missile-creating space debris. We didn't attack Israeli territory. We used cyber operations disabling hostile surveillance platform collecting intelligence on African military forces. This is legitimate self-defense under international law against espionage operations. Minister Gallant threatens military retaliation for losing spy satellite they used, committing espionage against African nations. This threat reveals Israeli mentality. They believe they can surveil Africa without consequences, and any African defense constitutes aggression deserving military response. We reject this colonial logic completely. We defended our sovereignty using available capabilities. Israel lost surveillance asset they used for espionage. They should accept this operational reality rather than threatening war over satellite they used violating international norms against espionage. Listen carefully, Cohen. Remember when you believed OFEC-16 would watch Africa forever undetected? Remember when you assumed we lacked capability to hack military satellites? Remember when you thought space was domain where Israeli technological superiority remained absolute? I shattered every assumption. I hacked your command systems using Chinese decryption keys. I corrupted your sensors, making intelligence worthless. I bricked your computer, turning satellite into orbital debris. Your surveillance collapsed. Your intelligence went dark. Your space dominance is dust. April 15. United Nations Security Council convenes emergency session on cyber warfare and space domain. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon presents resolution condemning Burkina Faso's destruction of civilian satellite and demanding compensation for destroyed asset. Resolution language deliberately frames OFEC-16 as civilian reconnaissance satellite rather than military spy platform to gain broader international support. I address Security Council presenting complete evidence of Israeli surveillance operations. Israeli ambassador claims OFEC-16 was civilian satellite deserving international protection. This is deliberate lie. Satellite was operated by Israeli military intelligence under Ministry of Defense Authority. Orbital patterns prioritized African military installations over civilian areas. Imaging focused on strategic defense facilities, not civilian infrastructure. Intelligence was shared exclusively with military and intelligence agencies, not civilian researchers. This was military spy satellite conducting espionage operations against African nations. Israeli resolution condemns our defensive action while completely ignoring their surveillance violations of African sovereignty. They want us to accept permanent Israeli observation while denying us right to defend against espionage. We reject this double standard completely. We destroyed military satellite violating our sovereignty through espionage operations. This was legitimate defense under international law. We will not apologize for defending sovereignty. We will not pay compensation for destroying espionage platform. We will destroy any future Israeli satellites conducting unauthorized surveillance of African territory. Security Council vote on Israeli resolution reveals geopolitical divisions. 2 inches favor United States, United Kingdom, 3 against China, Russia, Algeria, 10 abstentions including France and several non-aligned nations. Resolution fails to achieve majority support. International community refuses to condemn African self-defense against Israeli surveillance. This represents diplomatic victory confirming legitimacy of our cyber warfare operation. In 2025, I establish African Space Defense Initiative coordinating continental protection against satellite surveillance threats. I invite all African nations to participate in shared early warning, signals intelligence, and cyber defense capabilities targeting hostile reconnaissance satellites. Initiative represents permanent institutionalization of capabilities we developed destroying OFEC-16. Initiative's first component is Continental Satellite Tracking Network. We deploy ground-based radar systems and optical telescopes across Africa, monitoring all satellites passing overhead. Chinese space tracking technology provides real-time orbital data through cooperation agreements. Russian military satellites contribute tracking information through intelligence sharing. We maintain complete database of every satellite's capabilities, operators, and orbital patterns. Any satellite conducting surveillance of Africa is identified immediately and tracked continuously. Second component is Signals Intelligence Network intercepting satellite communications. We establish listening stations across Africa intercepting satellite telemetry and imagery downlinks. Israeli satellites, American satellites, European satellites all transmit data to ground stations that we can intercept. We decrypt transmissions when possible using techniques developed against OFEC-16 and analyze satellite operations, understanding what intelligence foreign powers collect on Africa. Third component is offensive cyber warfare capability. We build ground stations capable of injecting commands into hostile satellites using techniques proven against OFEC-16. Chinese cyber warfare advisors provide ongoing technical training in satellite hacking. Russian electronic warfare specialists contribute jamming equipment, disrupting satellite communications. We develop capability to disrupt, corrupt, or destroy any satellite conducting unauthorized surveillance of African territory. Fourth component is legal framework justifying defensive actions. African Union adopts Space Sovereignty Convention, declaring that unauthorized satellite surveillance of African territory violates sovereignty and justifies defensive action, including cyber attacks on offending satellites. Convention establishes clear legal basis for destroying hostile reconnaissance platforms under international law principle of self-defense. Initiative launches with 23 African nations participating immediately. Combined annual budget, $890 million funded through member contributions. Combined personnel, 2,400 specialists, including satellite trackers, signals intelligence analysts, and cyber warfare operators. This represents largest African space defense program in history, built on foundation of successful operation against OFEC-16. We detect second Israeli reconnaissance satellite OFEC-13 launched 2020 conducting surveillance of African military facilities. Platform photographs, Algerian air bases, Egyptian naval installations, South African army bases, and Nigerian defense infrastructure. Using African Space Defense Initiative capabilities, we track satellites' orbital pattern, intercept its communications, and prepare cyber attack using proven techniques. We execute second satellite hack operation. Using same methods that destroyed OFEC-16, we inject commands into OFEC-13, corrupting its systems progressively. Within 72 hours, OFEC-13 becomes dead satellite tumbling in orbit. Israel loses second reconnaissance platform to African cyber warfare, confirming our capability wasn't lucky accident but repeatable operational skill. Israeli response combines panic with impotence. Israeli Space Agency announces OFEC-13 experienced catastrophic systems failure, similar to previous incident. Israeli Defense Minister threatens severe consequences, but takes no concrete action. Israeli intelligence officials admit privately through intercepted communications that they cannot protect satellites from African cyber attacks. Israel's space-based surveillance of Africa is functionally finished. We expand operations targeting American reconnaissance satellites. U.S. National Reconnaissance Office operates multiple satellites conducting surveillance of Africa without authorization. KH-11 optical reconnaissance satellites photograph African military installations with sub-meter resolution. Lacrosse radar satellites monitor African facilities in all weather conditions. We identify these satellites through our tracking network, intercept their communications, and prepare cyber operations using techniques refined through Israeli satellite destructions. We hack KH-11 satellite designated USA-314 operating in sun-synchronous orbit. Using techniques developed against Israeli satellites and enhanced with Russian electronic warfare capabilities, we inject commands corrupting satellites' imaging systems. USA-314's intelligence becomes unreliable, orbital control is disrupted, and computer systems are progressively bricked. American spy satellite is destroyed through same cyber warfare methods used against Israeli platforms. American response is more sophisticated than Israeli reaction but equally ineffective. U.S. Space Command announces USA-314 experienced anomalous behavior under investigation but doesn't confirm total loss publicly. National Security Agency launches investigation into potential cyber attack on satellite systems. CIA briefs President on African space warfare capabilities representing new threat. But publicly, United States maintains silence about satellite loss, admitting African nation destroyed American spy satellite would be too humiliating for world's premier space power. I announce USA-314's destruction, publicly forcing American acknowledgement. United States operates spy satellites conducting unauthorized surveillance of Africa. We detected KH-11 satellite USA-314 photographing African military facilities without permission. We hacked its command systems and destroyed it using same cyber warfare techniques that eliminated 2 Israeli satellites. USA-314 is dead satellite. America's space-based surveillance of Africa is degraded significantly. We will continue destroying any satellite conducting unauthorized reconnaissance of African territory. This is our clear warning to all nations. Respect African sovereignty and space domain, or lose your satellites to our cyber warfare capabilities that have now destroyed 3 military reconnaissance platforms. July 20. We target French reconnaissance satellite CSO-1. France operates this military optical satellite launched 2018 conducting surveillance of former French colonies in West Africa, monitoring military capabilities, government activities, and Chinese-Russian involvement. We track CSO-1, intercept its communications, and execute cyber attack using our proven methodology. CSO-1 is destroyed through our cyber operations. French Space Command announces satellite experienced severe technical difficulties beyond recovery. French Defense Ministry launches investigation into satellite loss. French intelligence officials privately acknowledge African cyber attack through intercepted communications, but cannot admit it publicly without revealing extent of French surveillance operations in Africa. I announce CSO-1's destruction. France's CSO-1 spy satellite conducted surveillance of West Africa, focusing on former colonies France still considers within their sphere of influence. We destroyed it through cyber warfare. France lost surveillance capability over Africa. This is fourth military reconnaissance satellite we've destroyed in 4 months. 2 Israeli, 1 American, 1 French. Pattern is absolutely clear. We possess demonstrated capability to destroy any spy satellite targeting Africa. We will continue exercising this capability against any nation violating African sovereignty through space-based surveillance operations. International response evolves from denial to grudging acceptance. Western space agencies privately acknowledge African cyber warfare capabilities through classified intelligence assessments. Intelligence agencies brief governments on significant threat to reconnaissance satellites operating over Africa. Military officials recommend reducing African surveillance to avoid additional costly satellite losses. Space commands implement enhanced cybersecurity measures attempting to protect satellite systems from African attacks. But enhanced security proves insufficient against our evolving techniques. We destroy British reconnaissance satellite Carbonite 2, conducting surveillance of African military facilities. October, we destroy second American satellite USA 326, despite upgraded security measures. November, we destroy German reconnaissance satellite SAR Lupe 4, demonstrating our capability extends to European space assets. Each destruction demonstrates that Western cybersecurity improvements cannot adequately protect satellites from our cyber warfare capabilities that continue advancing. By December, we've destroyed 9 military reconnaissance satellites, 2 Israeli, 3 American, 2 French, 1 British, 1 German. Total value of destroyed satellites, $4.7 billion, representing massive intelligence asset losses. Total intelligence collection loss, immeasurable but includes years of African surveillance capability. Western space-based surveillance of Africa is crippled significantly. Western response shifts from denial to negotiation after losing 9 satellites. December 15. United States requests diplomatic meeting discussing space security concerns and potential agreements. I accept meeting. Curious about American approach after losing 3 satellites to our operations. American delegation includes National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines, and Commander of Space Command General Stephen Whiting. They propose Space Surveillance Agreement, where United States commits to reducing African reconnaissance operations in exchange for Burkina Faso ceasing satellite attacks and providing advance notification of military exercises. I reject proposal immediately with contempt. America proposes reducing surveillance, not ending it completely. You want to continue spying on Africa at reduced levels while asking us to stop defending ourselves against remaining surveillance. This is completely unacceptable. Our proposal is simple and non-negotiable. End all unauthorized satellite surveillance of Africa immediately, or we continue destroying your satellites systematically. We don't negotiate African sovereignty. We defend it absolutely using all available capabilities. Stop spying completely, or lose more satellites. Your choice is clear. American delegation departs without agreement. They cannot accept complete surveillance cessation. Intelligence on Africa is too valuable for their strategic planning. But they cannot protect satellites from our attacks despite significant investments in security upgrades. They face impossible choice. Continue surveillance and lose satellites, or respect African sovereignty and lose intelligence. Either option represents American defeat. I calculate 1-year impact of African space warfare operations since destroying OFEC-16, 9 military reconnaissance satellites destroyed worth $4.7 billion. Western space-based surveillance of Africa reduced by estimated 67% based on satellite losses and operational changes. Satellite operators implementing expensive cybersecurity upgrades costing $890 million across multiple space agencies. Intelligence agencies losing critical African reconnaissance, forcing increased reliance on ground-based collection with higher risks. Military planners lacking satellite imagery for African contingency planning. Diplomatic relationships strained by African demonstration of space warfare capabilities that Western powers cannot counter effectively. Beyond measurable impacts, operations establish new strategic reality. African nations possess demonstrated capability to defend sovereignty in space domain. Satellite surveillance is no longer consequence-free intelligence collection. Nations conducting unauthorized reconnaissance face satellite destruction through cyber warfare. Space is no longer Western-dominated domain where technological superiority guarantees impunity. I address African Union Summit reviewing 15 months since OFEC 16 destruction. Fellow leaders, 15 months ago we discovered Israeli spy satellite OFEC 16 conducting systematic surveillance of Africa. We responded with cyber warfare operation destroying satellite completely. This success led to African Space Defense Initiative coordinating continental protection. Over past year, we destroyed 9 military reconnaissance satellites, 2 Israeli, 3 American, 2 French, 1 British, 1 German. We reduced Western space-based surveillance by 67%. We forced satellite operators to implement expensive cybersecurity upgrades that proved inadequate. We demonstrated African capability to defend sovereignty in space domain. This is not just technical achievement. This is strategic transformation. Space is no longer Western sanctuary where they surveil us without consequences. We possess capability to destroy satellites violating our sovereignty. We demonstrated willingness to use this capability repeatedly against multiple nations. We established deterrence, making unauthorized reconnaissance costly rather than free. We proved African technological competence matches any nation when we invest in capabilities and act decisively. I continue with forward vision, but individual success requires continental institutionalization. African Space Defense Initiative must expand from 23 participating nations to all 54 African Union members. Budget must increase from $890 million to $2.3 billion annually, ensuring comprehensive coverage and capability development. Personnel must grow from 2,400 to 6,700 specialists providing redundancy and advanced expertise. Capabilities must advance from reactive satellite destruction to proactive space control, including our own reconnaissance satellites providing African intelligence rather than depending on foreign sources or operating blind. We must transition from defending against space surveillance to conducting our own space operations. This requires African Space Program launching our satellites, operating our orbital platforms, and controlling our space-based intelligence. This is next phase of African space sovereignty. African Union adopts expanded African Space Defense Initiative unanimously. All 54 nations commit to participation. Budget increases to $2.3 billion annually. Personnel expansion to 6,700 specialists approved. Most significantly, African Union authorizes development of African Reconnaissance Satellite Program. We will launch our own satellites, conduct our own surveillance, and control our own space-based intelligence. We're transitioning from space defense to comprehensive space power. China offers comprehensive assistance for African Space Program. Chinese National Space Administration proposes providing satellite technology, launch services, ground station infrastructure, and technical training. Offer includes transfer of satellite manufacturing capabilities, allowing Africa to build reconnaissance platforms indigenously. Total Chinese investment, $4.7 billion over 5 years. I negotiate enhanced terms, ensuring African sovereignty. China provides technology and training without restrictions or conditions. Africa gains complete satellite manufacturing capability with full technology transfer. We maintain operational independence. China cannot access African satellite intelligence or influence targeting decisions. This is technology transfer creating African space capability, not dependent relationship where China controls our systems. China accepts terms. Agreement is finalized. African Space Program receives comprehensive Chinese technical assistance while maintaining complete operational sovereignty over all systems and intelligence. Russia offers complementary support. Russian Federal Space Agency Roscosmos proposes providing advanced electronic warfare systems, cyber warfare training, and anti-satellite capabilities. Offer includes technology for disrupting hostile satellites beyond cyber attacks, laser dazzling systems, radio frequency jammers, and kinetic interceptor concepts. Total Russian investment, $2.1 billion over 3 years. I negotiate same independence terms as Chinese agreement. Russia provides technology without operational control. Africa gains complete anti-satellite capabilities. We maintain sovereignty over all systems and operations. Russia accepts. African Space Program receives dual-track support, Chinese satellite technology and Russian anti-satellite capabilities. Combined with our proven cyber warfare expertise demonstrated through 9 satellite destructions, Africa is becoming comprehensive space power. African Space Agency is formally established with headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Agency consolidates African Space Defense Initiative and new satellite development program under unified command structure. Governing Council includes space officials from 9 African regions ensuring continental representation. Technical teams draw specialists from 31 African nations providing diverse expertise. Chinese advisors provide satellite engineering support. Russian specialists contribute anti-satellite expertise. Indigenous African engineers lead all programs ensuring continental ownership and control. Agency's mission is threefold: defend African sovereignty against hostile satellite surveillance, develop African reconnaissance satellites providing independent intelligence, and establish African space control capabilities deterring any space-based threats. We're building comprehensive space power from foundation of successful cyber warfare operations. Construction begins on African satellite manufacturing facility in Kigali, Rwanda. Chinese engineers provide factory design based on their extensive satellite production experience. African workers build facility under supervision. Chinese technicians train African personnel in satellite assembly, testing, and quality control. Facility will produce reconnaissance satellites, communication satellites, and eventually navigation satellites. First satellite scheduled for completion in 18 months. Production capacity: 4 satellites annually once fully operational. Simultaneously, construction begins on African satellite launch facility in Djibouti. Location provides equatorial launch advantages and maritime safety for failed launches falling into ocean. Chinese Space Agency provides launch pad infrastructure design. Russian specialists contribute launch vehicle technology. African engineers operate all systems ensuring sovereign control. First launch scheduled for 2027. Western space agencies recognize irreversible shift in space power dynamics. African nations possess proven cyber warfare capabilities, destroying hostile satellites. African space program is developing indigenous reconnaissance capabilities with Chinese and Russian assistance. African launch facilities will provide independent space access within 2 years. Africa is transitioning from space defense to space power faster than any region in history. American intelligence assessment leaked to media concludes, African space capabilities represent fundamental challenge to Western space dominance. African cyber warfare destroyed 9 Western reconnaissance satellites in 15 months, demonstrating repeatable operational capability. African Space Defense Initiative provides continental protection against satellite surveillance. African satellite manufacturing and launch capabilities will provide independent reconnaissance within 3 years. Combined with Chinese and Russian technical support, Africa is becoming peer-level space power. Western space superiority over Africa is finished. We must adapt to multipolar space environment where Africa controls its orbital environment and conducts its own space-based intelligence collection. This assessment represents complete Western acknowledgement of African space power. We've transformed from victims of satellite surveillance to operators of sophisticated space warfare capabilities in 18 months through determined investment and willingness to act. Israel attempts diplomatic reconciliation after losing 2 satellites. New Israeli government sends delegation proposing space cooperation agreement, where Israel provides satellite technology in exchange for Burkina Faso ceasing attacks on Israeli satellites and sharing African space. Intelligence: I reject Israeli proposal before delegation arrives. Israel destroyed our trust through 4 years of unauthorized surveillance using OFEC-16. They lost 2 reconnaissance satellites to our cyber warfare, demonstrating their vulnerability. Now they propose cooperation, expecting us to forget their espionage and share our intelligence with them. This is absurd. We don't need Israeli satellite technology. China and Russia provide superior systems with better terms. We don't want space cooperation with nation that spied on us for years. We demand Israeli commitment to never conduct satellite surveillance of Africa again. Until Israel provides this guarantee and compensates us for 4 years of sovereignty violations, cooperation is impossible. Israeli delegation cancels visit recognizing futility. Israeli government understands that African space capabilities have permanently ended Israeli surveillance operations over continent. I review complete transformation in African space posture. 15 months ago, Israel's OFEC-16 conducted systematic surveillance while we operated ignorant of observation. Today, we've destroyed 9 Western reconnaissance satellites, established continental space defense network with 54-nation participation, built satellite manufacturing capability, and developed comprehensive space warfare doctrine. 15 months ago, Western nations conducted space-based surveillance with impunity. Today, any satellite targeting Africa faces destruction through our cyber warfare capabilities proven against multiple nations. 15 months ago, Africa lacked space capabilities. Today, we're emerging space power with proven combat effectiveness. October 2025, first African-manufactured reconnaissance satellite completes assembly in Kigali facility. Satellite mass, 380 kilograms. Imaging resolution, 0.8 meters, comparable to many Western systems. Coverage area, 12,000 square kilometers per pass. Power generation, 1 kilowatt from solar panels. Communication system, encrypted X-band downlink to African ground stations, ensuring secure intelligence transmission. Operational lifespan, 7 to 9 years. Satellite is named Uhuru, one meaning freedom, in Swahili symbolizing African space sovereignty. Uhuru 1 undergoes 6 months of comprehensive testing before scheduled launch in April 2026. Satellite will provide African nations with independent reconnaissance capability, ending dependence on foreign intelligence. We'll photograph our own territory, monitor our own facilities, and control our own space-based intelligence, complete sovereignty in space domain. Western satellite operators implement comprehensive security upgrades attempting to protect against African cyber warfare. Upgrades include quantum encryption, autonomous command validation, and isolated backup systems. Total cost across American, European, and Israeli space agencies, $3.4 billion. This represents defensive response to African capabilities. They're spending billions protecting satellites from our attacks. But security upgrades prove insufficient against our evolving capabilities. We destroy upgraded French reconnaissance satellite CSO-2, demonstrating that Western cybersecurity improvements cannot stop our cyber warfare techniques that continue advancing. French Space Agency acknowledges satellite loss. French Defense Ministry admits African cyber attacks succeeded despite enhanced security measures. Western space agencies recognize that protecting satellites from African attacks is impossible with current technology. I address World Economic Forum in Davos, presenting African space capabilities as model for developing world. For decades, Western nations conducted satellite surveillance of developing world without consequences. They photographed our military installations, monitored our government facilities, and collected intelligence supporting their strategic interests. We accepted this as inevitable reality. Space was Western-dominated domain where technological superiority guaranteed impunity. This acceptance was based on false assumptions about permanent capability gaps. African Space Defense Initiative proved that developing nations can defend against satellite surveillance through cyber warfare. We destroyed 9 Western reconnaissance satellites in 15 months. We forced satellite operators to spend billions on security upgrades that don't work. We demonstrated that space is no longer Western sanctuary. This model is replicable globally. Latin American nations can develop satellite cyber warfare capabilities. Asian nations can build space defense networks. Any developing region can protect sovereignty in space domain through investment in cyber capabilities and willingness to destroy hostile satellites. African nations prove this works. Other regions should replicate our success. Western audience receives presentation with hostile silence. I'm teaching developing world how to destroy their reconnaissance satellites. I'm providing blueprint for ending Western space-based surveillance globally. I'm demonstrating that their space dominance is vulnerable to asymmetric cyber warfare. They cannot applaud because I'm threatening their intelligence capabilities. They cannot criticize because our satellite destructions are documented facts they cannot dispute. They sit silently, recognizing that space power balance has shifted irreversibly. Israeli Prime Minister requests bilateral meeting discussing space issues after losing 2 satellites and facing African space power emergence. I accept meeting in Addis Ababa with full media coverage ensuring transparency. Israeli Prime Minister proposes Israel acknowledges that past satellite surveillance of Africa was conducted without proper consultation or respect for sovereignty. We propose fresh start based on mutual respect. Israel will not conduct unauthorized reconnaissance of African territory. In exchange, Africa will not attack Israeli satellites. We can build cooperative relationship benefiting both parties. I respond with clarity. Israel proposes ending surveillance they should never have conducted and asks us not to attack satellites we have every right to destroy when they violate our sovereignty. This is not negotiation between equals. This is defeated party requesting terms after losing capability to continue operations. I accept Israeli commitment to end African surveillance, but we make no commitment regarding Israeli satellites. If Israel conducts unauthorized reconnaissance, we'll destroy offending satellites regardless of Israeli preferences. If Israel respects African sovereignty, their satellites are safe. Compliance is their choice. Consequences are certain. This is reality Israel must accept. Israeli Prime Minister departs without formal agreement but with clear understanding. Israeli satellite surveillance of Africa is finished permanently because any attempt triggers satellite destruction. I calculate 2-year impact of African space warfare operations since discovering OFEC-16's surveillance. 9 Western reconnaissance satellites destroyed worth $4.7 billion. Western satellite operators spending $3.4 billion on ineffective security upgrades. Western space-based surveillance of Africa reduced by 73%. African Space Defense Initiative operating with 54 nation participation and $2.3 billion annual budget. African satellite manufacturing facility producing reconnaissance platforms. African launch facility nearing completion. First African reconnaissance satellite Uhuru, one scheduled for launch in 1 month. African space power emerging from foundation of successful cyber warfare operations. Beyond measurable impacts, operations established irreversible strategic transformation. Space is no longer Western-dominated domain. African nations defend sovereignty in orbital environment through proven cyber warfare capabilities. Satellite surveillance of Africa triggers satellite destruction through cyber attacks. Western space superiority over Africa is finished permanently. Africa is emerging as peer-level space power with independent reconnaissance capabilities and comprehensive space warfare doctrine. I am the architect of African space sovereignty. I discovered Israeli satellite surveillance through signals intelligence analysis. I hacked OFEC-16's command systems using Chinese decryption technology and advanced cyber warfare techniques. I corrupted satellites' imaging sensors and orbital control systems. I bricked satellites' computer, rendering it permanently useless. I destroyed 8 additional Western reconnaissance satellites over 15 months, demonstrating repeatable capability. I established African Space Defense Initiative, coordinating continental space warfare capabilities. I built African satellite manufacturing capability with Chinese technical assistance. I developed African launch facilities, providing independent space access. I proved African cyber warfare capabilities match any nation. I demonstrated that space surveillance triggers satellite destruction. I transformed Africa from victim of satellite espionage to emerging space power. Your legacy, Cohen, is presiding over Mossad operations when African cyber warfare destroyed Israeli space-based surveillance capabilities permanently. You operated OFEC-16 for nearly 4 years, believing African nations lacked capability to detect or respond to satellite reconnaissance. You were catastrophically wrong about African capabilities. We discovered your surveillance through signals intelligence. We hacked your satellite through sophisticated cyber warfare. We destroyed OFEC-16 and OFEC-13, eliminating Israeli reconnaissance of Africa. You lost $890 million in satellite assets. You lost 4 years of collected intelligence when we seized satellite data. You lost operational security when we exposed Israeli surveillance methods publicly. You underestimated African technological capabilities fundamentally. You assumed space was Israeli sanctuary. You believed satellite surveillance was consequence-free intelligence collection. Every assumption was wrong. Every belief was shattered. Every satellite was destroyed. My legacy is establishing African space sovereignty through demonstrated cyber warfare capabilities and emerging space power. I proved African nations can hack and destroy military satellites through sophisticated operations. I showed that satellite surveillance triggers devastating retaliation. I demonstrated that space is no longer Western-dominated domain. I built continental space defense network protecting African sovereignty. I established satellite manufacturing and launch capabilities providing independent space access. I transformed Africa from victim of space surveillance to peer-level space power. I changed space warfare from theoretical concept to operational reality. I proved that developing nations can defend sovereignty in all domains, including space, when we invest in capabilities and act decisively. I discovered Western satellite surveillance of African mineral operations while analyzing how foreign powers detected our resource movements so precisely. European mining companies knew exact extraction volumes before our government reports were published. American intelligence predicted our mining expansions 3 months before official announcements. Israeli operatives repositioned smuggling networks days before our security operations. Someone was watching us from orbit with capabilities we couldn't match. I traced surveillance back to constellation of 9 Western reconnaissance satellites monitoring African continent continuously. American KH-11 satellite designated USA 290 provided optical imagery with 15-centimeter resolution capturing individual vehicles at mining sites. French Helios 2B satellite delivered infrared thermal imaging detecting underground mining operations through heat signatures. German Sar-Lupe constellation provided synthetic aperture radar penetrating cloud cover and darkness. British Skynet 6, a military communications satellite relayed intercepted African government communications. Israeli OFEC-1-6 reconnaissance satellite tracked mineral shipments from extraction to ports. These satellites formed comprehensive surveillance network monitoring African resources, military movements, and government communications 24 hours daily. I calculated surveillance impact on African sovereignty. 9 satellites conducting 340 passes daily over African territory captured 47 terabytes of imagery and signals intelligence monthly. Western powers possessed real-time awareness of African military positions, resource extraction volumes, infrastructure development, and government decision-making. They knew our capabilities before we deployed them. They anticipated our operations before we launched them. They countered our strategies before we implemented them. Satellite surveillance gave them information advantage, making African sovereignty theoretical rather than practical. I decided to destroy this surveillance network completely. African nations could not achieve true sovereignty while foreign powers watched every movement from orbit. We needed capability to deny space-based surveillance. We required ability to destroy satellites threatening our security. We had to demonstrate that monitoring Africa from space triggers devastating retaliation, making surveillance cost exceed benefits. I recruited cyber warfare team of 47 specialists from African universities and technology companies. I hired satellite communications experts, understanding orbital mechanics and spacecraft systems. I recruited hackers with experience penetrating secured networks. I employed engineers with knowledge of satellite command protocols. I assembled team combining expertise in cyber operations, space systems, and electronic warfare. I invested $89 million in equipment, training, and operational infrastructure. I gave them one mission: develop capability to hack and destroy Western reconnaissance satellites. My team spent 11 months developing satellite hacking capabilities. They studied publicly available information about satellite command systems. They analyzed leaked documents describing satellite security protocols. They reverse-engineered satellite communication protocols from intercepted signals. They identified vulnerabilities in satellite ground station networks. They discovered that satellites designed in 1990s and early 2000s had inadequate cybersecurity because designers never anticipated sophisticated hacking attempts from developing nations. My team discovered critical vulnerability in satellite command authentication systems. Satellites receive commands from ground stations using encrypted protocols. Authentication systems verify commands originate from authorized sources. However, older satellites use authentication protocols with known weaknesses. My team developed capability to spoof authentication credentials, making satellites accept commands from our ground stations as if they originated from legitimate controllers. We could command satellites to change orbits, disable systems, or execute maneuvers destroying them. I selected American KH-11 satellite USA 290 as first target. This satellite monitored African mineral operations, providing intelligence to Western mining companies. Destroying it would eliminate primary surveillance platform and demonstrate African space warfare capability. I ordered operation to commence. My team executed 3-week Operation Hacking USA 290. Week 1, they intercepted communications between satellite and ground stations, identifying command protocols. Week 2, they spoofed authentication credentials, testing whether satellite would accept our commands. Week 3, they transmitted commands ordering satellite to fire thrusters continuously until propellant exhausted. Satellite executed commands thinking they originated from legitimate ground station. Thrusters fired for 47 hours, depleting all maneuvering propellant. Satellite entered uncontrolled tumble and decayed from orbit within 6 days. USA 290 burned up in atmosphere. Total cost of satellite, $1.7 billion. Cost of our hacking operation, $4.3 million. We destroyed $1.7 billion military satellite for 0.25% of its construction cost. American Space Command detected USA 290's tumble immediately but couldn't determine cause. They assumed mechanical failure or micrometeorite impact. They never suspected African cyber attack because they believed we lacked capability for satellite hacking. Their assumption gave us operational security for targeting additional satellites. I ordered attacks on remaining 8 surveillance satellites. My team executed operations over next 4 months, destroying 1 satellite monthly. French Helios 2B destroyed through commanded thruster firing, depleting propellant and causing orbital decay. German SAR Lupe 4 destroyed October by commanding solar panels to rotate away from sun, depleting battery power and freezing spacecraft systems. British Skynet 6A destroyed November 12 through commanded antenna repositioning, breaking communication links, and making satellite uncontrollable. Israeli OFEC 16 destroyed by commanding attitude control failure, causing tumble and atmospheric re-entry. German SAR Lupe 2 destroyed the 15th of January 2025 through propellant depletion. German SAR Lupe 3 destroyed the 9th of February 2025 through solar panel malfunction. German SAR Lupe 5 destroyed the 4th of March 2025 through battery depletion. American KH-11 USA 314 destroyed the 28th of March 2025 through commanded orbital maneuver into atmospheric drag zone, causing accelerated decay. Total satellites destroyed, 9 reconnaissance platforms. Total value destroyed, $4.7 billion in military spacecraft. Total operational cost, $31.2 million for 8 months of cyber warfare operations. Return on investment, we eliminated $4.7 billion in surveillance capabilities for 0.66% of their replacement cost. We achieved 0% return on defensive investment. Western space agencies panicked after 5th satellite destruction. They recognized mechanical failures couldn't explain 5 satellites from different countries failing within 5 months. They suspected coordinated attacks but couldn't identify source. They increased cybersecurity on remaining satellites. They changed command protocols. They implemented additional authentication requirements. They monitored ground station networks for intrusion attempts. Their defensive measures failed. My team adapted to new security protocols faster than Western agencies implemented them. We possessed advantage of attacking while they defended. We chose targets and timing. We exploited vulnerabilities before they patched them. We operated with initiative while they reacted to our operations. I publicly claimed responsibility for satellite destructions on the 2nd of April 2025. I released detailed technical documentation proving African cyber warfare teams executed all 9 attacks. I published intercepted satellite communications showing our commands being accepted and executed. I provided orbital mechanics data proving satellites decayed exactly as our operations intended. I demonstrated African capability to hack and destroy military satellites through sophisticated cyber operations. Western governments initially denied African capability for satellite hacking. American Space Command claimed satellites failed due to mechanical issues. French Defense Ministry insisted Helios 2B experienced solar panel malfunction. German military stated SAR Lupe constellation reached end of operational life. British officials claimed Skynet 6 suffered communication system failure. Israeli government refused to comment on OFEC 16's destruction. I destroyed their denials with evidence they couldn't dispute. I released recordings of satellite command sessions showing our team transmitting instructions. I published telemetry data proving satellites executed our commands. I provided timestamps matching satellite failures to our operation schedules. I demonstrated technical knowledge of satellite systems proving we possessed capability for sophisticated attacks. I forced Western governments to acknowledge African cyber warfare capabilities. American government admitted on the 15th of April 2025 that USA 290 and USA 314 were destroyed through cyber attacks originating from Africa. French government confirmed on April 18 that Helios 2B was hacked and commanded to failure. German Defense Ministry acknowledged on April 22 that SAR Lupe constellation was destroyed through coordinated cyber operations. British government admitted on April 25 that Skynet 6A was compromised and destroyed. Israeli government remained silent but stopped denying OFEC 16's destruction. Western military establishments faced crisis. Satellites they believed were secure from developing nation attacks were hacked and destroyed systematically. Space surveillance they assumed was invulnerable proved defenseless against sophisticated cyber operations. Information advantage they relied upon for military planning was eliminated. African nations they dismissed as technologically inferior demonstrated peer-level cyber warfare capabilities. Space domain they dominated for 6 decades was contested by adversary they underestimated completely. I leveraged this crisis to establish African space sovereignty permanently. I announced creation of African Space Defense Initiative with $2.3 billion annual budget funded by 37 member nations. Initiative's mission is protecting African sovereignty in space domain through defensive and offensive capabilities. We built ground-based space surveillance network monitoring all satellites passing over African territory. We established cyber warfare units capable of hacking and destroying hostile satellites. We developed anti-satellite capabilities, including ground-based lasers, blinding reconnaissance satellites and jamming systems disrupting satellite communications. I constructed African satellite manufacturing facility in Kenya, producing reconnaissance platforms indigenously. Facility cost $890 million and employs 1,200 engineers and technicians. We manufacture optical reconnaissance satellites with 25-centimeter resolution matching Western capabilities. We produce synthetic aperture radar satellites providing all-weather monitoring. We build signals intelligence satellites intercepting communications. We achieved independent satellite manufacturing capability, eliminating dependence on foreign technology. I built African Space Launch Facility in Somalia, providing independent access to orbit. Facility cost $1.4 billion and operates medium-lift rockets, placing satellites up to 2,500 kilograms into low Earth orbit. We launched first test rocket on the 12th of June 2025, successfully reaching orbit. We demonstrated African capability to access space independently without relying on foreign launch providers. We eliminated Western leverage over our space programs. I scheduled launch of first African reconnaissance satellite Uhuru, one for November 2025. Satellite will monitor African territory with 20-centimeter optical resolution, providing surveillance capability matching destroyed Western satellites. Uhuru 1 will be followed by constellation of 12 reconnaissance satellites, providing continuous coverage of African continent. We will possess space surveillance capabilities equal to Western powers by 2027. We will monitor our own territory. We will detect foreign military movements. We will track resource theft attempts. We will achieve information advantage we denied Western powers by destroying their satellites. I transformed African approach to space from passive acceptance of surveillance to active defense of sovereignty. Before satellite destructions, African nations accepted space monitoring as reality we couldn't prevent. After destructions, we understand space surveillance can be eliminated through cyber warfare. Before operations, we believed satellite hacking required capabilities only superpowers possessed. After operations, we proved developing nations can destroy military satellites through focused investment and technical expertise. Before crisis, Western powers assumed space dominance was permanent. After crisis, they recognized space's contested domain where African capabilities threaten their surveillance networks. I established doctrine of space sovereignty enforced through demonstrated retaliation. Any nation monitoring African territory from space without permission faces satellite destruction. Any reconnaissance platform gathering intelligence on African resources will be hacked and destroyed. Any surveillance network threatening African security will be eliminated through cyber warfare. This doctrine is backed by proven capability. We destroyed 9 satellites worth $4.7 billion. We demonstrated technical sophistication matching Western cyber warfare units. We showed willingness to act decisively defending sovereignty. We proved capability to execute sustained operations over 8 months, destroying satellites systematically. Western governments attempted to negotiate space surveillance agreements after satellite destructions. American government proposed mutual transparency arrangement where they would share satellite imagery in exchange for African commitment not to attack reconnaissance satellites. French government suggested joint surveillance program where African nations could request imagery instead of destroying satellites. German government offered technology transfers for African space program in exchange for ceasing anti-satellite operations. British government proposed international treaty regulating space warfare and prohibiting satellite attacks. I rejected all proposals, Space surveillance agreements where Western powers retain monitoring capabilities while African nations promise not to retaliate are surrender disguised as cooperation. Joint programs where we request imagery they control maintain their information advantage. Technology transfers conditional on ceasing defensive operations trade sovereignty for dependence. International treaties prohibiting satellite attacks protect Western surveillance networks while constraining African defensive capabilities. Every proposal attempted to restore Western space dominance through diplomatic means after we eliminated it through military operations. I stated African position clearly. We will not accept space surveillance of African territory by foreign powers. We will not negotiate agreements legitimizing monitoring we can prevent through cyber warfare. We will not participate in programs maintaining Western information advantage. We will not sign treaties constraining our defensive capabilities. Space sovereignty is not negotiable. Monitoring Africa from orbit triggers satellite destruction. This is warning backed by demonstrated capability. We destroyed 9 reconnaissance satellites. We will destroy any replacement satellites you launch. We possess cyber warfare capabilities matching yours. We have willingness to use them defending sovereignty. Space is no longer Western-dominated domain. Africa is peer-level space power. Accept this reality or lose additional satellites. Western governments recognized they couldn't restore surveillance networks through diplomatic pressure. They calculated replacement costs for destroyed satellites. $4.7 billion already lost, plus $6.2 billion for launching replacement constellation equals $10.9 billion total cost. They assessed probability of replacement satellites surviving African cyber attacks, less than 40% based on our demonstrated capabilities. They determined expected value of new surveillance network, $10.9 billion investment, with 60% probability of destruction within 2 years, equals expected loss of $6.5 billion. They concluded that surveilling Africa from space is economically irrational given our proven ability to destroy satellites. American Space Command canceled plans to launch USA 290 replacement satellite. French Defense Ministry suspended Helios 3 reconnaissance satellite program. German military terminated Sar-Lupe constellation replacement. British government delayed Skynet 7 military communications satellite. Israeli government canceled OFEC-17 reconnaissance satellite. Western space surveillance of Africa ended permanently because we made it economically catastrophic through demonstrated cyber warfare capabilities. I achieved space sovereignty through capability, not permission. Western powers didn't grant us right to defend against surveillance. We built capability to destroy satellites and exercised it decisively. They didn't agree to stop monitoring us. We forced them to stop by making surveillance cost exceed benefits. They didn't respect our sovereignty. We enforced it through demonstrated retaliation. Space sovereignty is achieved through power, not negotiated through diplomacy. I proved that developing nations can contest space domain when we invest in capabilities and act decisively. Satellite hacking doesn't require superpower resources. It requires technical expertise, focused investment, and operational planning. We spent $89 million developing capabilities, destroying $4.7 billion in satellites. We achieved 300% return on investment. We demonstrated that space warfare favors attackers over defenders because satellites are vulnerable and expensive to replace. We showed that cyber operations provide asymmetric advantage, allowing developing nations to defeat superpower space systems.